What's your
My
initial
pleasure.
reaction to this finding? It appears to be damning.
Well, I think firstly we should mention the fact that Runnymede Trust, all the way back in 2000, published the PAREC report. And this report concluded that Britain had the best race relations in Europe, that the view that racism is widespread in Britain is a partisan and skewed view. And Professor PAREC himself, he offered the view that Britain had a much more relaxed society when compared with other multiracial democracies such as France, Germany, and the United States. Now, 2 decades on, the same organization is now publishing a report which essentially depicts Britain as some kind of failed state when it comes to race relations, and suggests that England is systemically racist, and that impacts on the enjoyment of BAME rights, an acronym which I completely loathe. And it's interesting that essentially through its own output, Runnymede Trust is suggesting that in the space of 2 decades, Britain has plummeted from being an internationally reputable model for race relations to some kind of systemically racist backwater. And I don't think that's a view that many people would share, Mark.
And what are your thoughts about what the key metrics are when you come to measure how racist a country is? I mean, what's important? Is it the economy? Is it society? What do you think, Rakib?
Well, I think in terms of pay, for example, workers of Chinese and Indian origin actually earn more than white British mainstream workers. I think looking at the allocation of rights is really worth making this point that Britain, when compared to Britain itself, when it comes to matters of social cohesion and economic fairness surrounding race, is very much a European leader, in my view, when compared with other white majority multi-ethnic democracies in Europe, such as France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Britain comfortably outperforms those countries when it comes to the provision of anti-discrimination protections on the grounds of race, ethnicity, and religion. So I can't really support the core findings of this report published by the Runnymede Trust.
Now, you've formed Don't Divide Us. You're
Mhm.
staging an upcoming event entitled Is the UK Racist?
Indeed.
Tickets are available at don'tdivideus.com. But tell me why you set up Don't Divide Us and what the founding principles of it are.
Well, I think from my personal point of view, Mark, I feel that the current race relations debate in the UK is of a pretty poor quality. I think that all too often we have organizations which I consider to be part of this grievance industrial complex. They place racial identity at the forefront when it comes to examining a range of complex disadvantages which exist in British society. There are a myriad of social and cultural factors at play, Mark, which feed into ethnic and racial disparities, uh, family structure, community dynamics, socio-cultural norms, geographic inequality. It's worth mentioning that the UK is one of the most interregionally imbalanced societies in the industrialized world. I even think things such as migratory background, the amount of socioeconomic resources that first generation migrants have, that can be influential in terms of impacting on the future generational advancement of particular ethnic minorities. So there are various dynamics at play, but all too often there are a number of organizations who don't really want to take an interest in that because they want to peddle fundamentally warped interpretations of British society and its institutions, perhaps because they see financial gain in doing so.
There is some evidence that the nature of your surname, especially if it's a foreign-sounding surname, in particular, something of a black, Asian, or minority ethnic sort of ring to it, will impact your chances of getting recalled for a job interview, Rakib. And of course, there is the sense that many people feel that there is racism in society, especially perhaps those people that get endlessly stopped by police officers in the dead of
Mm.
night as they drive around in a nice car. And that, of
So
course,
I,
last time I checked, was not a crime.
So I think that in terms of labor market discrimination, I think there's definitely more work to be done in terms of creating a more meritocratic economy. I'm very supportive of the expansion of name blind applications.
Mm.
But if the effect is having a more how do you say an English sounding name is an advantage in application processes, then you could have an applicant by the name of Jermaine Powell who could be of Black Caribbean origin, and then you could have someone from Central Europe. Jermaine Powell would be the more culturally closer English sounding name. So even in that particular context, it is far more complicated than some people would make out. I think in terms of policing, I think there's definitely improvements to be made, Mark, in terms of trying to create police forces which are more representative of the local communities that they serve. But saying that, a recent survey by Hope Not Hate showed that 2/3 of ethnic minority people felt that the police were a force for good overall, and that racism in policing was down to a select number of problematic individuals. So while I think that there can be important positive steps to be made in terms of policing reform, I think we should guard against the vilification of the police, which wouldn't necessarily be representative of mainstream ethnic minority opinion.
Rakib, what's your view of the racial abuse that was directed at some of the England players after their exiting of the Euro 2020 final at Wembley?
Well, firstly, I'd make the point that the three young players who took those penalties and missed those penalties, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka, they showed immense courage. And I really hope that they'll bounce back stronger. They're definitely going to play an important part in England's future. I think in terms of the racial abuse, I'd make the point that when it comes to that kind of racial abuse being made in England, that's very much being made by a hardcore fringe of racist bigots, which are not even close to being representative of mainstream English society, which, by the way, is more likely to frame English identity in civic terms as opposed to racial terms. I think it's also important to make the point that much of this abuse, by the looks of it, was actually originating from foreign-based accounts. And there are a number of studies which show that there is a relatively high level of abuse directed at Black British footballers from foreign-based accounts. And in terms of talking about that in the wider context, it's important to be cautious and guarded when it comes to foreign state activity, hostile foreign state activity, which are looked to exploit racial tensions in Western societies. There is evidence which suggests that revisionist and authoritarian regimes are actually using social media to exploit existing social fault lines in Western societies such as the UK's.
Rakib, do you identify a difference in various ethnic groups and how racist Britain might feel to them? Is it necessary to go through people of different backgrounds from different places and identify the scale of racism they face?
Absolutely. I think it's very important. This is why I have a fundamental problem with the acronym BAME. I think it's really important to disaggregate that acronym and see what kind of social and political attitudes exist within separate ethnic minority groups, and then in turn how that breaks down and what kind of variations may exist in terms of gender, class, education level. Traditionally, people of Black Caribbean origin are more politically disaffected, especially their attitudes towards British democracy and the police force. While you can see South Asian groups, they may be less politically disaffected and are more likely to be satisfied with how the British democratic system functions. So I think it's really important to separate the groups and look at the various social and political dynamics at play within those groups, as opposed to homogenizing those ethnic groups and then lumping them together in this homogenizing BAME acronym.
Have you faced racism yourself in your life, Rakib, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I think in terms of, I think when you live in a multiracial society, I think, Mark, to be honest, a degree of conflict and hostility is inevitable. I'd make the point that I have received racist abuse, but from various sources. I think in recent times, I've actually faced racist abuse from both hard left identitarians and hard right ethno-nationalists. So I'm managing to unite a number of extremists together in their shared hatred of me. But I'm absolutely fine with that. It's like water off a duck's back. For me, I'll carry on pushing forward my message, which is very much the case that if you want to create a more equal and fairer society, you have to look at various dynamics at play, and you have to be honest about what the kind of social and cultural factors which are driving ethnic and racial disparities in modern day Britain.